Okay, so I just finished talking with Chris Anderson, and you have got to hear her story. A lot of times we like to forget about that little stint of time where, to stop the spread COVID-19. And for some people though, they actually got into the fight. Someone like Chris who put everything on the line, they risked it all just so they could give people the medical freedom that they're hoping to have. This is another incredible interview. You're not going to want to miss it. Her story must be heard, and I hope it gives you the courage that you're going to need to have in these last days when things continue to get worse. I have no doubts whatsoever that this is going to be great because you are honestly, and I know I've said this before, but you're like the most courageous person I've ever met. And I hope one day I can be as courageous as you. I really mean
You
that.
are. Yeah.
I don't know about that. Well, maybe the test will come, but I think of everything that you've gone through, and there's not many other saints that I can think of. In fact, there's none that I know personally who actually stood up for what they believed during a time of a serious lockdown and control, and faced serious potential consequences for that. So I guess let me start with that first question then for you. What is you know tell us a little bit about who you were prior to the 2020 COVID lockdown experience, right? Or who are you as a mom, as a Latter-day Saint? What were these core values that eventually, culminated in leading up to this COVID experience that we all went through?
Okay. Well, I'm going to go back just a little bit further because part of it is all about my awakening story. And I think we all have an awakening story for those who are on this side of the agenda that say they're awake, right?
Yeah.
So basically, I was raised in Utah my whole life as a member of the church, and we didn't attend doctors a lot. My mom just thought was more self-sufficient. We just didn't go. I have two sisters. I'm the youngest. And then when I found my husband up at Utah State, he's dairy farmer from Preston, Idaho. They had 9 kids, 7 boys, 2 girls. They really didn't go to doctors a lot either. I mean, you can imagine doing braces and doctors every other week or whatever. For 9 kids, they were pretty self-sufficient too. So they're very active LDS. And one thing that kind of opened my eyes was his dad had this dairy farm with cows, and probably in the late 80s, early 90s, I didn't look it up, but you remember when the government started subsidizing wheat and corn and soy
That's
and
right.
all that stuff. And they said, well, we're going to subsidize the dairy and the milk now too. And so they bought out his dad's dairy farm. And I'm thinking, well, how is the government going to produce all the milk now? Well, you have to pump them full of hormones to make them produce more milk, and then that created mastitis, and so they're giving him antibiotics.
Oh
And so
no.
now I'm like, well, that's going to go in our milk supply, right? So that was one of the little awakening things for me. And then, yeah, as a mom, I just was always kind of on this other side of just we're more self-sufficient. And since my husband and I were, kind of raised that way, we weren't running to doctors. I kind of like the challenge of figuring out for myself. I'm like, and then after the second or third kid, you're like, oh, I know what this is. I did have a good friend in my neighborhood that kind of guided me into some stuff. And because my oldest daughter did have some issues and I didn't know how to help her or whatever, but I'd go to the doctor and they're like, oh, she'll outgrow it or she'll be fine. But this neighbor really helped me open my eyes to different things and not do the drug route and things. So yeah, by the time like my third boy was, like 16, he wanted me to take him to a dermatologist for acne. The dermatologist was in a pediatrician's office and he goes, Mom, what's a pediatrician? I said, they're kid doctors. You just never went. So we really didn't raise our kids going to those, going to doctors and stuff. We just figured it out. So,
Yeah, and actually,
um,
I'll just add in there. There's a trend I've noticed that like the less that you go to a doctor, less frequently that you go, so that the more you're willing to figure it out, that you tend to have healthier lifestyles. just
Yeah,
naturally, right? You go because we can treat it like a crutch, and so a lot of people will say, "Well, then I don't have to worry about how badly I eat and so on and so forth because I can just go to a doctor. He'll hit me up with whatever drugs I'm going to need when I'm feeling down." But when we say that's not an option for me, then we start living in a healthier way. Then we naturally don't even need a doctor as much.
exactly. I mean, look at the Amish. I don't think they really got affected by COVID because they didn't watch the news or anything, and they don't have a lot of the diseases and illnesses that we have because they don't do what we do. So
Yeah.
they're more self-sufficient. So about in 2011, I I started a company called well, it was a little product. It was like a healthy cookie dough called Godo Energy, and I actually produced it and got it up and running in a lot of grocery stores and health food stores here, including Whole Foods. And I was all about transparency. I wanted people to know what was in their products and what they were eating. I wanted it to be clean. I just didn't see this on the market, and so I'm like, oh, if there's a need, I'll go fill it and create my own. And so they were like hand scooped into cookie balls. And by the time I got into Whole Foods, everything was, you had to follow this list of ingredients because they did not take propylene glycol, which is in a lot of flavorings and colors. They didn't take artificial colors and sweeteners and red dye. They didn't take caramel color. So we had to really abide by that strict list to be able to get into Whole Foods. And so I was working with the FDA then, and I learned a lot. And then by the time I'm out promoting my product, I would tell people like, yeah, there's no GMOs in this product and there's none of this and that. And they go, what's a GMO? And I'm like, really? So I had already kind of been in this side of things before and learned about all the things that they weren't telling us about our food and the things that they started doing to our food supply with pesticides and herbicides and spraying them and the glyphosate and all of that. Before I started this business, I was just always kind of a nerd and into nutrition anyway. So my Godo business taught me a lot. And then come 2017, I wound down that business. It was just to the point we couldn't hand scoop everything. We were doing well, but we couldn't find a machine to keep it in the ball and everything. So we just wound it down, and I went to nutrition school, which is what I always wanted to do anyway. I learned a lot. It helped me connect all the dots. And so then 2020 rolls around, and I had just got all this great information from going to nutrition school. And I joined a Facebook group that was all like-minded people, nutritionists, homeopathy, you name it, all these people. And we started sharing Fall of the Cabal and all these other documentaries and all this other stuff. And we were all just soaking it up as much as possible. And I would go around with my earphones on and listening to podcasts and stuff all the time. So it was no problem to listen to that and walk
Yeah.
into a store without a mask. And if people would say, oh, you're not wearing your mask, I'd be like, what? I can't hear you or whatever. But I would, I'd keep my distance. I'd keep the
Sure.
respect and everything. But it gave me the confidence to go around not wearing a mask. And I mean, it got to the ridiculous point. We don't need to go through all that because everybody was there and did that. But we
Well,
had our
I
youngest.
will say I'll actually interrupt you there. Actually, you should give as much detail as possible because I've discovered that most of us have really forgotten how bad it was, right? Like a lot of people just have chosen to erase that time period out of their brains because they don't want to think about like, oh, it was very contentious. Everyone was like, masks don't work, but masks work. Like we all try to erase it. So I'd say don't leave out any of those details. And before you keep going, I have to say I started smiling really bright, big earlier when you said, we're sharing these documentaries because now I'm like imagining you and all these moms, oh, all the cabal, like the guys are learning about all these things, and that's just not something you typically see moms getting together and sharing. So it's like this very interesting, like, whoa, like you created a group of warriors.
Yeah. Oh, and they were. There were. And I won't get on to that, but there's some amazing people on there that, I could stand up because I saw what they were doing and they stood up for Utah. And but yeah, a couple of really funny stories. So if you remember back, we had to follow the arrows in the grocery store. One aisle was safe if you go down that way, but you can't go down the back arrows, and
Yeah.
you had to stand on your dot and everything. And so I It was like a year after all this was going on. I had my husband down at a store with me here in Draper, and he goes, "What are all these big circles for, all these dots on the sidewalk?" And I go, "Where were you last year?" And he goes, people actually did that. I go, oh yeah. In the cold of winter during Christmas, people stood on those circles 6 feet apart. So, and they limited how many people would go into the store and the TJ Maxx or something, how many could go in there. And then it got to the point, we're in Salt Lake County, which is a little closer to Salt Lake City. Sometimes I don't really like it because it's a little more liberal, and the further you go south, it's more conservative.
Yep.
And so the counties further south than us, they're like, well, we don't have a problem here. We're not going to do all that. I'm like, well, then why is this county sick and that one's not? And none of it made any sense. And so then they said, okay, you don't have to do all of this stuff except for in federal buildings. And so my husband goes to the library, and they're like, oh, sir, no, you can't come in here without your mask. And he goes, oh, I'm fine. She goes, no, I'm serious. I will call my manager if you don't wear a mask. He goes, go ahead, call the manager. And then she's getting so mad because he's not complying. And then she says, okay, I will call the police if you don't put on a mask. And he's like, I don't care. Call the police. Of course, nothing happened. But it was just stuff like that. And then I'm like, well, I want to go try that out at the library. So I go down to the library, and she's sitting right there at her desk, and she's saying, oh, you can't come in here without a mask. And I said, well, what if you have CS? And she goes, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's okay. Go on in. She never asked me what CS was. You know what CS is, don't you?
Yes. Yes, yes. So, well, that's the funny thing is, like, I used to do that same thing. I go into Lowe's. Maybe that's cowardly of me. Yeah, they'd be like, "You can't wear this." I'm like, "Yes," and I would just walk by, and they'd be like, "Okay." Sorry. Speaking of lung issues, for those who don't know, I'm recovering from a lung infection. Anyways,
We won't
so
be
you did
polite.
that in the library. That's pretty great. Um,
So, so we're in 2020, and we have our youngest daughter graduating from high school, and they've already canceled prom. They've shut down everything, and it's just ridiculous. And then they've gotten to the point where, like, you can only have like 5 people get together, and then you can only have 10 people get together. And then they were up to like 20 people, and there was a bunch of moms, and I didn't even know any of these women, but they're like, who's with us? We don't want our kids to graduate like this. And I said, I'm with you. If you guys have got another plan, I'm with you. So we're going around all of our hometown trying to find a place that we can secretly have a senior graduation party that we won't get busted. And then finally, one of the moms piped up, and she says, well, I have a sister that owns this resort down south. And of course, down south is less,
sure.
they're more awake and open to what's going on. She says, you guys can come down there. We'll have all the kids make their own reservations and stuff. We won't even be attached to it or part of it, whatever. We ended up with 200 kids that we took from the high school, when you could only get 200 kids in May of 2020, when at that point you could only have 50 people together, no more
That's
than
right.
50 people together in the same place. And then a bunch of us moms went, and just to kind of chaperone and oversee it. And the one of the ladies I was rooming with, she says, oh, I'm going to go to Costco and pick up a cake because it's my daughter's birthday while we're down there. So she was going to go get a big sheet cake from Costco. She went to pick it up, and it was a little tiny cake. She goes, I ordered a big sheet cake. She goes, well, you can't get more than a few people together, so we don't make the big sheet cakes anymore.
Oh,
It was just
goodness.
insane and ridiculous.
It
So
sounds like you guys it's like, if this were the Roaring '20s, it'd be like, this is the speakeasy development that was that we're witnessing right here. Instead, it's the COVID speakeasy. Like
we actually had a really good time in 2020, and we got together, we did everything. I saw my family more because they were always home, not out traveling and stuff. We actually had a really good time. So, if anybody got uh, quarantined, or what was that, contact traced or whatever,
yeah,
we didn't do any of that. But we just had a reason to get together more, and people were out of school and stuff. So it was a great time because our whole family was together. So right after they announced COVID, which is, what, 6 years ago, almost this week? Yeah, 6 years ago this week,
yeah,
because it was St. Patrick's Day. I remember I got this impression, or this prompting that came to me that just said, your life is going to change. And they'd already kind of been talking about the whole COVID stuff. I'm like, well, duh, isn't all of our lives going to change if this
Yeah.
actually comes to fruition that they're going to do what they say is going to happen? I'm like, yeah, all of us lives are going to change. But looking back on it, I was like, why did I get that? Now I can clearly see why. So we go down, we have the senior party down at Ponderosa Ranch, and we had a blast. And hopefully it's like the senior party that kids will never forget, because it was just in a time when the whole world was shut down, and there was people down there in California and stuff, and they were calling their husbands saying, you got to, California was crazy and very shut down. They
Oh
said, this
yeah.
is great. We're seeing kids hanging out of trucks and singing, and life is normal here, and it's so good. And we're all, going, you guys be quiet. Don't let anybody know or see you or whatever. And they said, no, these people thought this is so great. We needed that. We needed that boost of, little bit of, sunshine to see that you guys are actually living and not abiding by all this crazy. And I drove out of Zion's, and it occurred to me, and I called my husband, and I said, do you think this whole mask thing that we have to mask is so that they can see who is obeying and who's not, who's complying? And this year, the World Economic Forum at Davos admitted that it was an exercise to see how many would comply. So
They
it was
admitted
totally an
that?
exercise. They just admitted that last month in February at Davos, World Economic Forum. Say,
Wow.
yeah, it was not really needed, because we already know that it's been admitted that the 6 feet social distancing and the mask and everything was all just made up, even though it caused so much damage to kids and isolated people. And just, it was so wrong. It was so wrong.
Well, it's amazing that you had
So,
that foresight there to, that impression. Like, you think it's a way to show compliance, and that's a very good point, because even now, even still today, there's still a lot of signs they put out, that they're looking for cues to see who is compliant, who is not compliant, right? And unfortunately, I will say the most compliant people in America happen to be Latter-day Saints, though, right? And I'm sure you'll share a little more of this soon here as well, because as we all know, we like to follow rules and we like to get along. And the most common, I say this having loved living in Utah. I loved living there when I was there, but I will say that the greatest value, aside from family in Utah, that they have, is the value of they valued getting along and being liked more than they did their freedom, more than they did their core beliefs. Right. And so there was a way to show obedience and how good we could be by being obedient, then we would do it. Right. It
yeah.
didn't matter the cost. Right. It was a badge of righteousness.
Well, and you say that, but I mean, which religion didn't comply by it? Because the whole world was doing it, and everybody wanted to, yeah, just get through this and save grandma. And, you were in the minority if you didn't follow along, if you didn't go along with that, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, it just goes against all your, I mean, we're here because of our agency. So our agency was being taken away. And I've got the Constitution by Ezra Taft Benson right here.
So good.
And in page 6 of this from Ezra Taft Benson, he reminds us that our rights don't come from government, they come from God. And that we need to remember that our God created people with certain inalienable rights, and they in turn created government to help secure and safeguard those rights. So we are superior to government, and we should remain master over it, not the other way around. And I think a lot of that was forgotten. Our agency was pulled, and we were shamed if we didn't go along with it. And we had our oldest daughter, they had to come home from chiropractic school because everything was shut down, and she had a 10-pound baby July of 2020, and she's like, I'm not wearing a mask. I'm big and it's hot,
Yeah.
and I'm not wearing a mask. And I'm like, well, I'm not letting my daughter do it alone. If she's going to stand up, I got to stand up too. And I'm proud of my kids. They didn't they didn't rock the boat. They didn't get in anybody's face or anything, but they did it with dignity, and they stood up, and they still stand up for what they believe. So I was really proud of her for doing that. So we get back from the senior trip, and a lot of these moms are thinking, we don't even know who our friends are, because a lot of friends are like, abandon us, whatever, because we're not we're not saving grandma. We're not abiding by all of this stuff and everything.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I lost friends, and so we said, can we just keep this group text together for a while longer? We don't know what's going to happen next. It's been longer than 2 weeks to slow the spread. Can we
Yeah.
stay together? So we did. We kept that text together, and then more people, more moms were joining, and it got bigger until the point where we needed to move it. So I moved it on to GroupMe, and it grew and blew up to about 500 people. So as of today, we still have over 400 people on that, which we
Wow.
use it. It's called the Freedom Fighters GroupMe, and we still exchange a lot of information, and caucus information, legislature information, and so it's been a really good, helpful source, because I wouldn't know all this stuff on my own without it. So I'm really glad that we started that, but we need to be bigger. We need to be so much bigger.
Sure. Now, so like when these mandates, right, and this pressure to comply, or to save grandma or whatever the excuse was, um, you chose this different path, right? You talk about doing so to support, in solidarity with your daughter who was pregnant, and getting ready to give birth over the summer. So, I guess, at what point did you end up on this path where you were helping people get the treatments they needed? Because, it's one thing to talk about how, there's a lot of craziness around the COVID mandates. But then, right, we have the COVID vaccine, we have the treatment, we have the you must, do this in order to take care of your health. And people actually, it was a real sickness. People really were getting sick. So how did you go from where you were there to suddenly now you meet Dr. Moore? I'd love to know a little bit more about how you met Dr. Moore and how you got involved helping him.
So from this Freedom Fighters GroupMe, we started a band together, and because I have this nutrition background, I'm studying different things on the web and stuff, and there's doctors that are actually coming out with some protocols saying, hey, they're not even giving you any preventative advice, or if you do happen to get sick, which SARS is in the cold family, and it's SARS 7 or something, that's not the first one, and they're not even giving you any advice. It's just, hunker down and stay down until there's a vaccine available. There's nothing else we can do. And then you go to the hospital, and they've got these crazy protocols and remdesivir and the ventilators that were killing people.
I
They go
said they
in there,
were
and
killing people. Yeah.
yeah, they literally, you couldn't even see your loved ones there. They separate you, and everybody was dying from COVID, whether it was a gunshot wound or a motorcycle accident. Everybody's
Yeah.
dying from that. And this is still all the stuff that we're tracking and following. We're like, okay, we'll have to see if this is true come down the line. And lo and behold, a lot of it has come to be true, all the conspiracy theories. So I ended up meeting Dr. Moore on that Freedom Fighters GroupMe, and he joined the GroupMe, and so we kind of joined forces. And he's like, I've been studying Dr. Zev Zelenko. He's this Jewish doctor. He's got like 11 kids in New York. He's since passed away from cancer, but he was the one that came up with a Z pack, that you need a
Oh,
zinc,
really?
and yeah, the zinc actually helps, and then you need the ivermectin to help, but the zinc helped the ivermectin get into the cell. So he came up with this whole formula himself, and when Trump got sick, he's the one that helped Trump with the ivermectin, and well, I think he gave him hydroxychloroquine. So he's the one that introduced all this, and then everyone's like, oh no, we don't want to use those drugs. But so Dr. Moore, being a doctor, was able to secure two pharmacies in our area, and these pharmacies worked with us, and we had, I can't even tell you how many hundreds of people that would come and want this as preventative, or if they get sick. I had people reaching out to me on Christmas Eve and Christmas and everything. Hey, my husband's sick. What do I do? And I called Dr. Moore, and he he'd answer everybody's call. And he'd say, well, ivermectin can't hurt anybody. It's been around for decades and it's
Yeah.
won a Nobel Prize. It's one of the safest drugs out there. They use it in Africa for the Sunday pill. They give it to every African.
Every
And
single Sunday.
so
They literally give it to them every Sunday. It's called Sunday Sunday, they call it.
and then here they're like, oh no, that thing that'll kill you, or it's horse based and all this stuff. And it's, they're trying to, say how bad it is here. And like a lot of people already know that this drug's been around a while. And so he started running prescriptions for anybody who wanted them. And the nice thing about these compounding pharmacies is they didn't gouge people. There was one lady I had one of my old college roommates, and she said, hey, one of my friends is really sick. Can you could Dr. Moore call in a prescription named Logan? And I called him and he says, sure, absolutely. So she went to go pick it up, $625 for just a few pills, for just a few ivermectin. And so these two compounding pharmacies down here weren't doing that. You can get like a whole prescription for $25, and they were working around the clock to get anybody what they needed. I had people calling from Vegas saying, can you send it to me? I said, well, no, because they're not licensed outside of Utah, but I can send it. If you know somebody in St. George, send it to them. They drove over from St. George to help their 70-year-old dad. And from what we know, what we saw, everybody got better. Nobody died. Nobody went to the hospital. So we had a control group right there. And I don't know, I'm sure there's other groups out there, but I don't know anybody else that has a control group that can actually stay and look at this and say, oh, wow, that was actually working. You have enough people that we could study that and look at that. They didn't want to know that. They didn't want to hear that. And at the same time, we got invited to a little private Wednesday group because we were helping people with the ivermectin and then the shots, which I'll get to. And this was a closed group, very secretive group. And it was doctors, nurses, pharmacists, and people would come every Wednesday and they would tell us what they were seeing in their practice, what they were seeing in the hospitals, what they were seeing in all, there's researchers, fertility researchers, everything. And so we got a lot of really good insight as to what was really happening out there instead of what we're being fed on the media. And so, and then there's all this media being propagandized out there about, everybody needs their COVID shot and everybody needs this. And so this is in September of 22, when the Biden administration was in, when they started mandating it, that you have to have it for frontline workers, doctors, nurses, for military. All those guys got it first. And then we're going to help the school teachers. And then we're going to, what was the next group? Doctors and nurses and military. If you had over 99 employees at any corporation or
I
anything,
remember that,
they
yeah.
were mandated to take it. There was never a law.
I
They
think
were
I think the original number was over 25 because I remember that, the company I was working for at the time, they submitted a lawsuit, the second it came out because it said, like, there's more than 25 workers here. We can't afford to do this for, and that's wrong. I was like really impressed they did that. But I think the number actually used to be that low. It used to be much lower.
It probably was. And if you do put in a question to chat AI, chat GPT,
Yeah.
it will say, oh yeah, OSHA was behind all this and they had to do it. Well, OSHA doesn't make the laws.
No.
And neither do three-letter agencies, CDC or FDA or NIH or the WHO. They don't make the laws. They do not govern us. And so that's the one thing that everybody has to remember. And so anyway, so we had this little control group where we had our own people, and so we were reporting what we were seeing, what people were reporting to us, to this Wednesday group. And after everything went down, a really good friend of mine, Colette, sent me the story from David Bednar about we've all heard the one, how do you know if it's me or if it's the Holy Ghost?
Yes, yes.
And I was like, oh yes, this is the best, because he unwillingly, as a missionary, was going to meet Elder Packer let's see, he was in
It was
Germany,
Germany.
and
Yep.
yeah, so you remember the story. And he just felt prompted to give him some money. And he gave him some money, not knowing why, just in case he needed to get some food along the way or whatever. And Elder Packard ended up having to use that money to stick it in a passport for his wife, because she only had like a 3-year passport, and they weren't taking those to go through East Germany. And I may not have every detail right in the story, but when the soldiers came, he stuck that money in the passport, and they came back and they said, "Okay, you're good to go." And they said there's no way that they should have taken that passport, but they took the money and they let him go. So Elder Bednar's thinking, okay, why was I prompted to give him this money? And they look at it as like, it wasn't bribery. It was a righteous prompting that they got from the Holy Ghost. And I'm like, exactly. So when Dr. Moore said, when all these shots were mandated, he said, I want to help people. And I said, you shouldn't do that alone. Let me help you. I never thought twice about it. I didn't stop and think, was that what I should have done? Should I check with my husband? I didn't even bat an eye. I just, when he put that out there, I said, I want to help you too. And I've never looked back. I've never regretted it with anything. And so when she said that story about Elder Bednar, I was like, definitely, no doubt. I know where that prompting came from.
Yeah.
And so I met Dr. Moore. We already met. But then when the shots came out in September of 22, well, they came out earlier, but then Biden mandated it after Trump
Yep.
was out of
It
office.
was enforced, and I think people forget that transition is that we had a lot of flexibility under Trump when the COVID thing happened, and once
Yeah,
Biden went in there, it was very much. The way I describe it is very communistic. Like, after that point, it was like comply or die. Like, we will destroy your
yeah,
business, we'll imprison you. We don't care. You will do what we say.
right, exactly. He even said, I'm going to send the National Guard door to door. We didn't know if we could go buy groceries or even leave our house if he was going to send the National Guard door to door. And under the Trump administration, it was Operation Warp Speed. You don't have to take it. It's never going to be forced, but it's going to get the economy back working again. And that's the thing that people need to remember was if it takes 5 to 7 years for them to actually bring a vaccine to market after they do all the clinical trials and everything, and this one took 7 months, we would have been shut down for 5 to 7 years. Where would we be now?
Yeah.
We'd probably all be dead or in, who knows? Yeah, who knows where we'd be. So, so yeah, the shots came out, they were mandated. We were helping a lot of these doctors and nurses. And sadly, in this Wednesday group, we were meeting nurses who already took it and had injuries. And so they're like, my good friend Irene, she had an injury, and her husband was like, well, both of us parents need to, stay around for our kids. I'm not going to take the shot. And so because she was having these heart issues and different things, and she noticed other nurses were having the same issues. So he didn't take the shot, but he did get COVID, and he went to her hospital, and he ended up passing away. They didn't give him treatment. They wouldn't let her in to see him, anything like that. So we ended up also helping the military and a special ops military. One guy came to me. He was in his 70s. But you remember under the Biden administration, when he first got in, he pulled out of Afghanistan and left
That's
a
right.
bunch of people there too. So he pulled out, and this special ops military had been working on for a year to go back in and rescue his pilots. He had trained 14 Afghan pilots, and he showed us the video when we got his card and everything for him. And there's only 13 pilots left. They sent a video of them beating up and killing the 14th pilot.
Oh, man.
And so he says, if we don't go in now, they're going to find out where they're hiding, and they're going to go in and kill them all. So we went by protocol. So if you came in to get a shot, you would have to come back for your follow-up one in 3 weeks. So if anybody came from out of town or anything, because we had LAPD, because California was crazy, New York was crazy, Canada was crazy, we had Canadians coming down, but you had to be in person, just like you were there. You had to show receipts and show that you were in person. So, so you were physically there to get a shot. And when people would go in to get a shot, kids would get saline shots, of just nothing, and the adults would get a card. And so
So
everybody knew what
this
they
was
were.
Dr. Moore's clinic specifically that was giving people
Yeah.
saline shots as they were coming in?
Just the kids, yeah. So, but everybody knew when they were coming in exactly what they were gonna get. Nobody came in and, was like, "Oh, I didn't get the real thing," whatever. You could have if you wanted to, but nobody asked for it. Everybody knew exactly what they were getting.
Yeah.
So I was, like the gatekeeper. I was supposed to screen people and, make sure everybody knew what they were getting, and if they were, aware of what the whole program entailed and everything. So, but I had to break, the operation codes, so or less, so that this guy could get his vaccine card faster, so he could go rescue those pilots in Afghanistan faster. So he couldn't be there 3 weeks and come back in 3 weeks, whatever, to go back and help them. So, we helped a lot of missionaries, uh, people in the church. There's a lot of people we helped. And then in December, um, December of 22, I went to the Mormon Tabernacle Choir Christmas program, and somebody had given me tickets, and I went, and they had Nicholas Winton's son there. I don't know if you know who Nicholas Winton is,
I don't.
but I didn't know who he was either. I'd never heard a story or anything. And his son told this whole story about how back in like 1942, I don't have the
Oh,
year
wait.
exact.
Nicholas Winton's the guy who saved all those kids?
Yeah,
That's his son was there?
yeah. And he did it for the Christmas program for the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. And I'm not a person who cries, but it's a mess listening to that whole story, because he rescued 600 kids, found them adoptive families, got them out of Germany and into Prague. And then they go back years later, and like today they just did a movie on him like a year ago.
All
To
right.
date, it's like 5,000 people now because of those 600 kids. So generationally, there's 5,000 people that came from those 600 kids that he saved their lives. And of course, he had to forge documents, he had to forge passports, he was writing presidents and heads of state. Everything was fraud and forgery. But he saved 600 lives that today is 5,000 lives and still growing.
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting there listening to this. And luckily, I was with a friend who's totally all on board with me, because I'm just a mess, and just like, I'm like, I can't believe I'm hearing this, this whole story. And I went home and Googled and looked up everything that he's ever done. And I was so impressed with the guy. And skipping back a little bit to our Wednesday group, our little private Wednesday group, we were like, how are we going to get this word out? There's so much propaganda, and there's so many people buying into all this propaganda that they're feeding out on the news and everything. And I kind of thought, well, we've got all these people right here that are injured from it. Why don't we write a script and put our own documentary together and put it out there for people to see? So we did. It's called, you can go up and look it up. It's utahsafeandeffective.org. And that film is still out there. It cost us $10,000 to produce, and it's still out there. And we didn't get a chance to really get it out and promote it, but it's a really good film. Everybody in there is local. A lot of them are like ER workers, hospital workers, missionaries. Peyton's in there. He was a missionary that was injured from a shot, and he's an amazing kid. And it just showed real life stories of what was happening to people, and what happened right after they took their shot. And so if anybody wants to go watch that again, it's utahsafeandeffective.org.
I'll make sure I
So,
put that link in the description of the video so people can check that out.
yeah, it is really good documentary. There's a lot of good facts on there. It's really well done. So then the next month, January 2023, we'd actually kind of shut the operation down in September. And then one lady, September of 22, it was kind of winding down. People weren't looking for it anymore, didn't want it anymore. Let's see. yeah, it was September. I'm pretty sure it was September 22. Anyway, one lady came to us and she needed a kidney transplant. And I said, well, I think they've shut the operation down, but let me ask Dr. Moore. And of course, she said yes. And so she was able to get her kidney transplant. So they had already passed laws in Utah, and we were proactive in these laws being passed, and this Wednesday group that said you cannot require a COVID shot to go to school or for work. It did not include any medical procedures. And here this poor woman comes to us and she needs a kidney transplant. And what's she going to do? I
Yeah.
know there's a guy, a father of five young kids in Canada that died because he wasn't willing to get the COVID shot and he needed an organ transplant and he passed away.
Yeesh.
So Dr. Moore helped her. And then January, about mid-January, his office gets raided. I get a text saying OIG is in my office. I'm not talking. I don't even know what OIG is. I had to go Google it. I was actually down at my daughter's because she had just given birth to her third kid, a baby girl. And so I'm down there taking care of her and her other kids while her husband's at work. And I'm, you know, beside myself trying to be like, okay, what do I do? Where do I go? I'm trying to get my phone number changed or whatever. I see that two people showed up on my doorstep. They confiscated his phone and his office manager phone. And then so I came home, I packed a bag, and I took off for 3 days. I didn't take any credit cards. I didn't take my cell phone, didn't take anything but my laptop. And I just started deleting every single person that I had ever made contact with in there and deleting everybody just to protect them because I didn't know what they were going to do, if they were going to go after these people or what. But I
Yeah.
just went for 3 days. So I drove to my mother-in-law's house that lives close. And I told her I needed a safe house and she just laughed at me. But she let me in. She totally gets it. She's totally supportive and everything. So she laughed at me and she took me in for 3 days. And then I thought, okay, I think I'm safe. I can go back home after I got all these records deleted and everything. But it was a really amazing experience. You try to go somewhere now in day and age for 3 days and be totally disconnected. It's a whole new world. I saw things that I don't usually see. I saw, my grandkids in a whole different light. It was a whole new world. It was amazing. So
So you're
come,
rushed. So they confiscate his phone. I'm assuming that he may have been put in jail in the meantime, and
yeah,
they've already come to your door. I'm assuming you saw it through the Ring camera. So you went off. You went to go save everyone's information. Protect it from being confiscated. So you're deleting that stuff. How was it though trying to come home? Because I mean, I can imagine like, okay, somehow they haven't found me. It's been 3 days, and now you're going, okay, I have to go back to the house at this point, and they're gonna get me. Like, there's no way. Did that come across your mind at all? Because that's what I would be thinking.
well, yeah, I did end up, because we did have to go to court and get processed and go through the whole thing. And we got this whole list of what we can and can't do now. And they came and confiscated any guns. We can't have any guns in the house. And they took my passport. You can't leave the state without getting permission first. And they can deny it if they feel like, if they want to. They would search your whole house and your car. And yeah, you really felt like a prisoner. And I was like, this is like, where's the due process?
Yeah,
And where's the criminals who actually started this whole thing? Because we had by this time met so many people, including like Breanne Dresden, who is very well spoken here in Utah because she's from Utah, and she started a React 19 group that has over 40,000 members now. And it's just people who've been injured by the shot and they're ignored and they're trying to help each other because there's no insurance codes, there's no help, there's nobody coming to save them, and they're trying to save themselves. A lot of times these people commit suicide, and it's really sad. So she has written the book Worth a Shot, and it's a really good book, excellent book. So you mentioned that Dr. Moore went to jail. He did over Memorial Day in May because they kept going back and forth on these parole conditions. We have a parole officer, and they kept saying, well, I have to go get a full-time job. I have to have a W-2 job so they can track me and know where I'm at all times. And yeah, it was crazy. And I was still trying to work that out. And my attorney was like, no, you don't have to go get a full-time job. You're grandma and everything. You're taking care of your grandkids and you're helping out and all that stuff. And I said, okay, thank you. But by May, it still wasn't resolved. And they said, you either comply and do it right now, or we'll compel you to do it, or whatever. And your DNA, we haven't given up our DNA, which wasn't even on that checklist. Or you do it right now, or we'll compel you to do it in jail. So I'm like, okay, I'll go give it up right now. And they take you into this long hall, go through a vaulted door. There's 3 U.S. Marshals back there, and it's very intimidating. And you just feel like, yeah, you feel like a criminal. But this is the U.S. Marshal system, and this is how they process you. Dr. Moore turned him down. He went to jail. He was in there for 12 days. It was over a long weekend. He's a single dad. He wasn't able to talk to his family. They actually sent him to Logan, 2.5 hours away from here. And when he got out, they put a ankle bracelet on him and put him on house arrest for the rest of summer. So he was able to go from work to home and nowhere else. He had 2 hours on a Sunday to go do his grocery shopping or something, and that was it. So there was no communication. We weren't supposed to talk about the case anyway, but 2 of his other co-defendants, which later took plea deals and testified against us, they worked together. So they're like, you work together, you have to talk, and we're neighbors. And so they never said, no, you can never speak to each other. But obviously he's got this thing on. He had been doing podcasts and things too, speaking out. And so I don't think they like that. They're trying to shut him down. They don't want all this other information out there because they were going after many doctors. And there's just a few that I can name, like Dr. James Thorpe. He's good friends with Dr. Moore. He's an OB, and he started speaking out about what he was seeing in his practice. A lot of miscarriages, a lot of stillbirths and infertility. So they were after him, to silence him. Mary Talley Bowden, she's a doctor. Dr. Richard Boutard is a doctor, and he actually was speaking out on CNN. And there's a clip of him where they're saying, he's saying, yeah, I wouldn't take the shot. I think it's a bioweapon. I think it's a kill shot, whatever. And he noticed his water bottle had already been opened. And soon after that, he got really sick and passed away. So they think he was poisoned. We already talked about Zev Zelenko. Dr. Eric Naputi, this guy, you should go look him up. But Dr. Eric Naputi was a chiropractor. And he was on social media, Facebook and Instagram, and promoting prevention and what to do if you do get COVID. You can take vitamin C, you can take vitamin D, and all these supplements. And he says, and I will even send you supplements. You just pay for shipping. He spent like $5 million of his own money to send people supplements. Wow. Guess how much they charged him? They sued him for $508 billion with a B dollars. $508 billion, because they were saying that he's one of those misinformation spreaders. So they had all these doctors like Robert Kennedy Jr. and Judy Mikovits, all these people that they labeled misinformation spreaders. There's nothing out there that can cure COVID or prevent it. And if you say that there is, we're going to come after you. So obviously now, Dr. Moore became one of those, and Peter McCullough, who's the most published cardiologist there is out there. And he's trying to speak out about all the heart conditions and different things that he was seeing in his practice, and they're trying to silence him and censor him any way they can. So it was just, you could just see what was going on. So they shut him down through the summer wearing his ankle bracelet. And if I did want to get him any information, whatever, I would say, hey, I've got some lettuce in my garden. Do you want some lettuce? And he'd say, sure. I would type up some notes because I knew they already had my DNA and stuff. I'd put gloves on. I mean, I felt like living like I'm harboring Jews. I felt like I was back in Germany when you have to sneak around town and you have to be so careful. And I would literally just walk by and throw it over his fence, and hopefully his big dogs, wouldn't eat it first. But that is
Okay.
how I communicated with him. And um, until, he got that off. But I mean, we really didn't communicate a whole lot. And then, do you want me to let me skip ahead now to November 6th,
Sure.
when we got arrested.
Yeah,
So,
tell us a little bit about that, and then I wanna ask you, a little bit about, a couple other things too.
okay. Yeah. Um, so November 6th, right the day after the presidential election. What are we in? 23, 24. We're in 24. Yeah.
24.
So 24 presidential election. And Trump wins the election, and Trump had always made all these promises that, the January Sixers are going to be let out day one, and anybody else that has been persecuted for standing up against all the COVID stuff or anything is, we're going to help you. So we're thinking, okay, we really need Trump in there. We really need him to win, and he wins, and so we're happy and we're excited, and we're going to go get the grandkids, and we're going to go down and have a fun little celebration. I'm wearing my "Make America Great" hat again, and my "Let's Go Brandon" shirt, and everything. And my son-in-law called me that morning. He goes, "Hey, there was two men in here looking for you," because they I was able to put that I worked for my son-in-law's chiropractic, but I didn't have to be there every day.
Mm,
And so that's why, because they want to come find you if they want to come arrest you. So these two men were US Marshals, and they were coming in to arrest me. And I said, well, it's probably the prosecution wanting me to take a plea deal, and I'm not talking. So I wasn't even worried. Didn't even have the faintest idea. So we hop in the cars, and my daughter is going to follow me down with all of her kids. And I had to go meet a guy first and give him a down payment because our heater had just gone out in the
oh,
house. And so I'm going to meet this guy to give him a payment. And right outside my subdivision, I see flashing lights, and I immediately pull over because they've got me scared to death. If I get any traffic violation or anything, I may not be able to leave the state or do
sure.
something, or maybe I'll get arrested. So I was always really cautious, and I was like, so I start, pulling out my driver's license and ID and everything, and I'm just like, just comply with everything. I turn and look, and there is four black unmarked cars with lights on. Four men in full bulletproof vests, or fully armed with
Oh my
guns, and they're saying, "Step out of the car." And I'm saying, I don't know why. There's no warrant for my arrest. There's nothing. And so my daughter starts driving by slowly, and I'm like, wait a minute, don't leave me here. I don't know what's happening. So she pulls in front of me, and she gets out. She's like, what's going on? They said, stay back. She's resisting arrest. And she's like, why can't we ask what's going on? I mean, you see all this stuff where the human trafficking and stuff. And I'm
sure.
thinking, these guys are in unmarked cars. I have no idea what's happening. What is going on? I have done nothing to warrant this. And so I said, well, can I at least turn off my car? And they're like, no. And so I said, can I call my husband? They said no. So I just voiced to my phone, hey Siri, call my husband. And it went through. And by then, as all he could do was hear all this commotion in the background. And so they won't tell me why I'm being arrested until I'm handcuffed with my hands behind my back and in the truck and heading to jail. And they said, you communicated with Dr. Moore, and now you're under arrest. And I was like, well, that's really weird timing, the day after the election. And what had happened is back in October, so a month before, he sent out a text saying, hey, we have this hearing tomorrow. We have a good chance of getting it dismissed. But because my attorney wasn't always really up on communicating stuff to me.
Sure.
So he was telling us that this hearing was going on. And so, and that was it. That was it. And so basically, yeah, so they're saying, because we communicated together. So I get to the Salt Lake County Jail, which is huge, and all these people are coming in. You sit with your hands behind your back, handcuffed to a bar on just a cement bench for a good hour until they come to process you into jail. And then it takes 8 hours to process you into jail. And there's everything in there. People that are high on drugs, screaming and yelling. I'm sure there was illegals in there, because there's one guy, I asked him a question if he speaks English or whatever. He goes, "I'm from Venezuela, no English." I'm like, okay, well, these are part of the illegals that have probably been coming and flooding into our country, and he was in there, and you're put down in this pit. And the crazy thing of it is they said that we communicated, but then I get to jail, and who's there? Dr. Moore.
Doctor.
And it takes them 8 hours to process us. We could talk about anything we wanted in those 8 hours, because we didn't have any phones listening to us or anything. And it's a crazy house because all these people are whacked out on drugs and everything, screaming and yelling. There's no way they're listening to your conversation. So you're down in this cement pit with just cement benches all around it. There's one bathroom in the corner, and of course it doesn't lock. So you're just taking a chance if you have to use the bathroom. And you are in there with the worst of the worst. And so you move hour by hour down to each pit until everybody ends up in a cell, and then you get all of your blankets and everything. No pillows. You get a couple blankets, a pair of PJs, a little tiny toothbrush about this big, and a cup. And you're put into your cell. And I ended up with the top bunk, which I was really afraid I was going to slip and fall and get out. So I ended up just pulling my 4-inch little foam pad on the floor and sleeping on the floor again, no pillow or anything. And the guard came along, and he's like, "I don't like you sleeping on the floor." I'm like, "Well, I'm kind of nervous climbing up and down there." I'm trying to tell him, I'm like, "I'm 62. Do I have to climb up and down on that, whatever?" And he's like, "Okay, but you know, I'm like, "Can I just sleep on the floor? Is it so wrong?" And I had my own cell at first, and it did have some scriptures around in that, and that was kind of cool. So I wrote down the scriptures, and then a couple days later, the nuns come in, and I was curious to go look at these scriptures and see what they said on the walls. I was actually only in there 2.5 days. It sounds like I was in there for an eternity. It felt like it was. But it was eye-opening. It was a refiner's fire. And I think, if Heavenly Father's trying to teach me something, that would be it. People are like, "Oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you." And I'm like, it was actually kind of a cool experience. I wouldn't want to repeat it.
Sure.
But you can't go through something like that and not come out and be the same person. Just the people you meet in jail and the stories they have and the things that they're going through, you're so humbled and you're so grateful for the life you have, because these people they come from such crazy backgrounds. You're like, why would you drink or do drugs and do this over? And then you listen to their horrible life, and you feel so bad for them.
Yeah.
So
So
we
what, so
get
let me ask you this then. When you were with Dr. Moore, you guys were able to talk about everything. So were you just catching up, or were you strategizing, like what might you have to do next? Like, what was that like?
Well, we're mostly like, get a hold of our attorneys, for one thing, because what they were saying is, "Okay, now you guys really messed up." And we're like, "Really? You guys are going to have to stay there till trial in July, and it's November. So it's 8
Oh,
months. You're going to stay in
that's
jail
what they
until
told you?
trial." Yeah, that's what they told us. And they said, that's what our attorneys were being told from the prosecutors. And they said, you're going to stay there 8 months. And I'm going, no, I've got other issues going on at home. It's not like other family issues don't take a back burner because I'm going through this trial. I've got other things I got to take care of. I am not staying here. And so we end up with the hearing, and we went in on Wednesday, and we get a hearing on Friday. Yeah, it was on Friday. And so we went in pretty early on Wednesday, and then by Friday night I was out. But I go in and I get this hearing via Zoom on with the judge. And at first, the guy running the whole Zoom can't get the tech stuff figured out. And the judge goes, should we just wait till Monday? And I'm like, no, absolutely not. And so he finally gets it figured out. And my attorney says, well, she needs to be released because she has baptism tomorrow of one of her nephews, and then her son's being put in as a bishop on Sunday. I have no idea this has even gone down. I have no idea. My son's 30, and I'm like, what? And so I find out while I'm in jail that my son's being made a bishop, and so the judge agrees that I can get out because I need to go see my son, be ordained as a bishop. And I'm thinking, this is crazy. This is nuts. And so, anyway, Dr. Moore does not get out.
Oh no.
And because they're like, it's his second time and he's a flight risk, they're just making stuff up at this point. It was crazy. He
I mean,
stays
it's
there.
so obvious that they're grasping at anything they can because their whole power is going to be exchanged. Like Trump is going to come in, so all of the empowerment that they get from a corrupt head of state is going to be gone. So they have to get their kicks in.
Exactly. And that's a good point that you brought up, because they said, oh, well, 8 months, you'll stay there till trial, but now that you're incarcerated, you have the right to a speedy trial. So we happen to have this week open before inauguration. If you want to have your trial, you can stay in jail until, so, no planning of trial or anything. You can stay in jail until your trial, and we'll move it up to January. Does that sound better?
Oh,
Well, and the other thing that, that I told you that we had a hearing in November to dismiss it, which we thought looked really good because they were saying the CDC, that we violated the lawful actions of the CDC. Remember, I said 3-letter agencies don't make the laws. So there had just been a court case with Chevron, and they said, no, only Congress makes laws. Chevron, you don't make laws. CDC doesn't make laws. FDA, NIH, none of you people make laws. Only Congress. So we're thinking this is going to get dismissed and we're going to be done. The whole hearing was all predetermined. He came out with a stack of papers like this, reading it, and we're going, okay, so this was already preset. And not only did they not dismiss it, but they put a necessity defense on us saying that we cannot talk about any harms done by the COVID shot. We can't have any evidence and we can't have any witnesses. And so there's really not a lot we could do to prepare for trial anyway, right? Because we had no defense. We couldn't even tell them what our motive was, that we were just basically trying to save people's lives. We weren't doing it. We did not get paid a dime. Cost us way more than anything. And so, yeah, we didn't have a defense. So I get out and I go to this baptism the following day, and it's my brother-in-law. And it's crazy because now we live in these two-dimensional worlds, right? With people who believe this thing way and people who believe this way. Well, one of my brother-in-laws is like, let's not talk about it because I didn't tell my wife anything. Sure. And so we're all, emotional and all want to cry. This is like such a super sweet moment in our lives. And most of the family gets it, but we have to act like everything's cool and nothing happened for this one sister-in-law that's there. Oh. So and then we go over after and we're eating all the typical Jell-O and everything after that. I'm just, usually like, I'm like, oh my gosh, this food tastes so good. It is so good. My daughter's just laughing, going, was the food pretty bad in jail? I'm like, you can't even imagine. I can't believe that Dr. Moore would have to stay in there that long and what he had to put up with. It's just insane what he had to endure. So yeah, then the next day we go to my son's ordination. And like I said, I am not an emotional person. My husband and my daughter are so close to the Spirit. They drop of anything, they're in tears and they can feel the Spirit so close. And I am not like that. But I am struggling and just having the hardest time because I have so much gratitude. I've been through this refiner's fire, and I'm not the same person. I don't want the real world to rub back off on me again. I don't want to listen to the old music I used to listen to. I just want to go to the temple, and I just want to be in the light. and it's just that opposition in all things, I could
Yeah.
feel it. I could feel the dark and the light so close right there. And so I'm supposed to be incognito because nobody's announced that he's going to be in the bishop and that. And they get up and it's November, 1st of November, and they're singing Christmas songs. And I'm about coming unglued. And he's like, Mom, hold it together. I'm like, I know. Because I have no way to explain why my mom's breaking up because of Christmas songs. But I made it through. And anyway, I did want to include a few things about some of the facts about the vaccine so people have a little information on the background of
Sure.
that. Is that okay?
That's fine, yeah.
You did have a question first. Let me answer your question.
Well, I'd say, it was just kind of transitioning to the next part, but so you go ahead and talk about, like, what are some of these vaccine facts that people should be aware of?
Okay. Yeah. So first of all, not all, but a lot. And I didn't write down all of them, but the vaccines do have aborted fetal cells in them. They don't tell you this. They've got it marked somehow else. If you do look at the ingredients, how many people do look at the ingredients? And if you did look at the ingredients, would you serve those to your kids? No, you would be labeled as child abuse if you served those kind of chemicals to your kids. And if people, ever question it, I'm just saying, go look at the ingredients and see if that's something you want to put in you or your child's body, if you can figure out what half of this stuff means. But so in the COVID vaccine, the aborted fetal cell is WALVAX-2, and it was produced it came from an aborted little girl from China. She was a 3-month-old fetus that had, they used her lung fibroblast. And that one is, they duplicate that cell, and it's in the COVID vaccine. The MMR, the
Measles.
measles, mumps, rubella, right, uses the WI-38 aborted fetal cell line. Shingles has the MRC-5 aborted fetal cells, and chickenpox has the WI-38. Yeah, I've got a friend that is suffering from shingles right now. Of course, she had her shingle shot too. So that's just something, if you are against abortion, but you're pro-vaccine, that's something you need to look into, because they do have a satanic element to them. And a
They do.
lot of
Well,
this,
I'd say, what people don't realize is you create a market. You create a market, a demand for aborted children. It could be so, like, you could say, "Hey, I'm totally against abortion," but once you support these types of vaccines, because they don't have to make them this way, but they do, and once they start making them this way, now you have a demand. You have a market for it, right? And most market engines, they don't just go away. They don't just disappear. Like
right.
yeah. And so you talk about the satanic part of it. I mean, we're seeing the whole cabal side of things becoming very obvious now, becoming very evident. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Oh, no, no, that's an excellent point. Yeah, I appreciate that. It is satanic warfare. It definitely is. I mean, he's after our soul. Why would you put anything into your temple, into your body, that has anything that would fog your brain or your spirit or diminish that light? And to me, that is, it's spiritual warfare. Why would you do that? And so I'm trying to put out enough information that people can actually go look this up. And don't take my word for it. Go do your own research and go look some of these things up.
And I'll even say, let me just throw this in there, because a lot of people use AI, and I know AI decently, and AI will only pull from readily available sources, like the most commonly accepted, most easily found, right? So you can't just be like, AI, like, you actually have to say, find me, like, here's what I've heard. Find me sources that support it. Because what it'll first try to do is they'll try to talk you out of this conspiracy that you've found, right? It'll be like, it's made up. I mean, I've had to do that thing with gender, transgenderism. where because I had actually read the original paperwork. And so when I said, well, find the stuff for me, all it did was find all these most commonly accepted peer-reviewed articles that didn't follow any of the standards, scientific standards that supported, transgenderism and transitioning as a very good thing for people. And I said, and I had to tell AI, I know that's not true. I've read this thing. Pull this, and it finally had to say, "Oh, you're correct. In fact, we can't even say those sources are good because they didn't follow the scientific method." And like started going through all the things it knew were made it sources made them ineligible sources. And I'd say that's the same thing when it comes to this sort of information too. You got to be very careful about how you get AI to do your bidding.
Exactly. Yeah. And I had that same thing even just using Google today. I had to get off Google because I was looking for an inconvenient study. It's a documentary put out by Del Bigtree. It was just a few months ago, like in maybe September, and Google didn't make it easy to find. So when I changed search engines and went over to like swisscows.com, I could find it. But it's an inconvenient study.com. And it's a documentary, and it's about the Henry Ford Foundation. In 2020, they finished a study. They wanted to show that vaccinated kids were healthier than unvaccinated kids. It proved
Sorry.
just the opposite.
Yeah, it's just the opposite. It's that when you said that, it instantly made me think of the book of Daniel when they're like, "We're going to prove that the kids who eat the king's meat are healthier," and Daniel's like, 10 days, just give us, nothing but oatmeal, basically. And they go, "Oh, look, like these people are healthier."
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
And people will argue, they'll go, well, the Henry Ford Foundation is very pro vax. Yes, they are. So they hid the study, they put it away for like 10 years or something because the guy that, finished the study, he's like, I'm going to get fired. But it's all come out now in this documentary with Del Bigtree and the High Wire. And it's, you can go to an inconvenientstudy.com and look for that documentary. It's mind blowing, but it will even go through all of the statistics of what the percentages of the kids that were vaccinated versus unvaccinated and what the differences were. Just January 21 of 26, the American pediatrics, the American, so the pediatrics of America, the American
Sure.
pediatrics, I'm
Yes.
saying that backwards, they were sued from Children's Health Defense, which is what Robert Kennedy Jr. used to be over, and from practitioners and families. And the lawsuit is under the Regal Act because they told families that childhood vaccines are safe. They've done long-term safety studies done on them, and they didn't disclose any harms. Doctors profited from insurance incentives that you have to have so many in your practice, have, herd immunity and all this stuff. So they actually are dealing with a lawsuit right now. So we'll see how that one comes out too. And just going back into even just the whole COVID thing. I won't read this whole thing, but it's this is the United States of America petition for investigation. The COVID vaccine and the whole protocols itself broke all 10 Nuremberg codes of 1947, and in not Utah but the USA, they did a duplicate document of the Nuremberg Code for the USA, which is the Belmont Report, which basically says the same thing, that we will not be used as guinea pigs or experiments. This was an experimental vaccine. We never knew what was in it. We were never told what was in it. We were just told you get it or you lose your job or you can't go to school or whatever. It also broke the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution. For your privacy and your freedom. The only law that was really broke in COVID, we didn't break any laws. They argue, maybe fraud, but the law that was broken was the HIPAA Act.
Yep.
You have to show, you're to go to a jazz game, or here we had to go to a jazz game, or to get into a BYU football game or something, you had to show your vaccine card. They came out under the Obama administration. They came up with the PrEP Act in 2005 that was setting up for COVID. They're saying in the future, if there is some kind of pandemic or some kind of health emergency or something, we're going to put this emergency use authorization in place that just says, everything's off the table, and this has complete shield immunity. If we, need to come up with some vaccine to save the world. And
Interesting.
so it's protected under the PrEP Act and the EUA, although the EUA does state that it has to be proven that it's safe and effective. It's never been proven for that. So anyway,
So
yeah, and I won't go.
let me ask you this question. Just because there's so many facts here people aren't aware of, but
Yeah,
at the same time, people, if they don't want their minds changed, their minds won't be changed, right? And sometimes when we're so bought into the emotional, to the righteousness of something, we don't relinquish that, and therefore, we will mistreat each other because of it. And I want to speak very specifically about your experience here, because during that time, many in our faith, and like you said, all churches too, but like I have a higher standard for our faith members because we have the fullness of the gospel. We have the gift of discernment, at least we should, right? We have the Holy Ghost. We ought to be the ones who are most cautious around guarding our liberty. And unfortunately, we're not always that. So what I'm trying to say is, you have this time period of COVID where members of the church, they treated the church's encouragement to get a shot as well as the government's encouragement to get a shot, but they treated it like it was a commandment. I literally had a bishop who was like, the brother said you better get it done, so you better do it, right? And my sister had a stake president who was letting people go from their callings left and right if they didn't mask up when they went to church, that they were revealed that they hadn't gotten a shot yet, like, you're not obeying the prophet, like, so you have these crazy sort of experiences. But yours is far more than what I just described is very surface level. You went through far more than that because you were way more involved, right? You were actually fighting for people's health, for their lives. So how did, what was it like dealing with the mistreatment from other members of your faith who you might have hoped could have supported you, right? How did you handle that sense of loneliness and that judgment when you were following your own conscience?
yeah. Well, there's two scriptures that come to mind. 2 Timothy 1:7, and for God have not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and love and sound mind. And like you said, we've been taught as Latter-day Saints that we need to have eyes to see and ears to hear. And President Nielsen said a lot of things, but the thing that I heard him say the most was, you will not be able to survive spiritually in the next coming days without having your own testimony. Did I say that right?
Well, that was one of the elements. The other was with you will not be able to survive spiritually without having the Spirit with you more greatly in
Constant
your
companion,
life, right? Yeah.
constant companion of the Holy Ghost. There you go. Yeah, and that was the one thing that stuck out to me. And I said, we're a church of agency, and we all still have our free agency, but we may not if we don't start sticking up for it now. We could lose that agency, because what has Satan done since the beginning of time? He's enslaved as every time. It's just, that whole pride cycle comes around, and then we're enslaved again. And I mean, and COVID's not over. This isn't done. It's what's the next thing? Digital ID. I mean, he's working to enslavement again. And the next scripture that comes to mind that I was thinking of is oh, I just had it. Where is it? Oh, okay. 2 Nephi 28:31. Cursed is he that putteth his trust in man, or shall hearken unto the precepts of men, save their precepts should be given by the Holy Ghost. And I think that's all you need to say. And we are a diverse church, and we need to respect each other. I'm not going to get out there and try to get in people's faces and say, hey, why are you doing that? That's crazy, or whatever. If that's the way they feel, that's the way they feel. I feel bad who people are going around. I mean, I was in Hawaii last month, and there was a lady at the bus stop by herself in Hawaii when the weather's warm and humid, and she's in a mask by herself. And I just feel bad for people now going, how sad is it that people have been feared to the point that they can't live without fear and they can't have that discernment for themselves. And DNC 636 was my scripture last year. And I mean, it was out there anyway, but it was like, oh, this is a perfect scripture for me this year that my mind blanked out. Look unto me in every thought, fear not, doubt not.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a lot of fear going through COVID and that, but this was a scary experience, and this was fearful, and I had to really learn how to change my thoughts and change my thinking and not let fear overtake me, because I went into the trial, completely alone and not being able to, talk to Dr. Moore or anything. And then they took out this, whole necessity defense where we couldn't even have a defense. And so Dr. Moore's attorney filed for a petition with the DOJ about a year ago in March, and they rejected us. They turned us down. We're like, hey, we thought the Trump administration was going to take care of all these people who are being persecuted, for any crimes that the Biden administration had put out there, and they rejected us. So I guess we're going to court. I have no idea how it was going to end or anything. I would go to the temple, and I would, the impressions I would get was, don't worry, this isn't your battle. I knew they were after Dr. Moore, not me, but I knew I was there for a purpose and to serve a purpose. And another time when I went, I literally felt like excitement. I didn't know why. I did not feel down or worried or anything. It's just like everything's going to be okay. And the first day we went to trial, or like when we got indicted, like 2.5 years ago, my husband heard this song on K-Love that was like, everything's going to be okay. And he goes, I never heard that song. And it just came on. And then we were going down for the final trial, and this song came on saying, on K-Love again, I'm going to see a victory. And I'm talking to my husband going on, and all of a sudden the song is saying, I'm going to see a victory. And I stop and I go, what the heck with this song? And he goes, I know, I'm hearing it too. And I go, is that a sign or what? But it's just the little tender mercies, that, you're not looking for. They just kind of pop up. So just to finish real quick with the trial, we go and we're like, okay, how are we going to present this, because we have no defense? And our attorney said, okay, well, off the bat, she says, well, this was a whole government-run operation, and we can see that, we can follow the money, and we can show that you didn't cost the government any money. If anything, there was no money to be lost. And that actually did come out in court, because they brought in 3 expert witnesses, and Christopher Duggar, who's head of the CDC, said, well, to make them safe and effective, we had them expire within 60 days. That's how they made them safe and effective. And so we're like, okay. But what that eventually did was everything that Dr. Moore's office destroyed or threw out was all expired. So it was worthless. They couldn't even come up with, you had to come up with $1,000 to be charged fraud. And they couldn't even come up with that. But we didn't even get to that. And the next day they had the head of BARDA, Gary Disbrov, who was the head of BARDA, and he said, well, and none of these guys could hear what each other was saying, and they were all kind of, the whole agenda was falling apart. But the head of BARDA said, we produced 1 billion vaccines, and we destroyed 300 billion because we didn't plan on the enemy, his quote, the enemy, the people who would not comply and take them. But that's what he meant by the enemy. And so we ended up throwing away 300 million doses of COVID vaccines out of that 1 billion. Our attorney, who apparently I didn't know is left, came out of there. The light bulb had just gone off in her head. And she says, oh my gosh, I've got to get a freaking MAGA hat now. She goes, you guys were right all along. And she woke up, and And it was amazing to see that light bulb go off for her. So it was so cool.
That's great. It's
Um,
so funny. It's like, hey, when was your red pill moment? That was her red
that was
pill.
it. She was so red pilled. Yeah. So we went through 5 days of this trial, and we had a rally on the first day, which the prosecutors accused me of gerrymandering because they said, well, Ms. Anderson, because they were stalking me on my social media, I had promoted um, the rally. People come support us. This is for everybody's health freedom and for our own, so they can't do this again. We need to stop this. And I had put that out there, and they said, oh, well, Ms. Anderson is jury tampering because she posted this on her social media. So in other words, that proved that they were stalking me.
Oh yeah.
And the judge said, last time I heard we had freedom of speech in this country, and no. So on the last day, we did one more rally, but let me back up for one more second. On the second to last day, they had the head of the Utah Health Department up there talking about absolutely nothing. What's this form and what's this column? Oh, this is the patient's name, and what does this mean and what does that mean? It was ridiculous. So I'm sitting there next to this intern, and I said, blow up your screen. I want to get all of those lot numbers of the people that they're showing that came in. And so I blew up these lot numbers, and I came home. You can plug into this top of it's cut off. This one looks better. And I'll show you what the Swiss cows versus the Google one means. But this is the website, How Bad Is My Batch? Anybody can go there, and in this little box right here, you can plug in the batch number that's on your COVID ID card. And I bring them home and I plug them into How Bad Is My Batch? The first one I pull up is this Janssen & Janssen one, batch number 1822811. And immediately it shows 12 people died right after they took that shot,
Oh
and
my
500,
goodness.
578 adverse events. This is how many people went to the ER and all these adverse events. And here's the 12 deaths immediately after they took the shot. My blood was boiling. Next one I plug in was Pfizer BioNTech, batch code FG3527, 34 deaths, and over 1,047 adverse events. Here's
Oh
34
my.
deaths. And keep in mind that the VAERS reporting system is maybe 1%. So you can add a couple of zeros, if not
Yeah.
more, to that. I was so mad. I went to the gym to get out some frustrations and that. And this guy comes over and he goes, man, what energy drink did you take before you came here? He goes, I need some of that. And I said, it is rage and anger. We are talking about nothing. And I can't even bring up the fact that these are the vaccines that Dr. Moore got in his clinic, and we can't even talk about it. We can't even talk about it. I printed them off, and we had a rally the next day, and I handed them out. There was other angels and stuff that showed up. You know how I said did I say there will be angels on your left and angels on your right and round
No.
about you? That was my other scripture. And they did. They showed up. I felt my heavenly angels and my earthly angels. There was a guy named Ed Zoll that showed up from Died Suddenly on X from Florida. I never knew who he was, but he played a huge instrumental role in our case getting dismissed. He got through to Marjorie Taylor Greene and to Mike Lee and to A.G. Bondi. He's got connections all over. Another lady came in that day, Shannon Joy from the Shannon Joy Show. I just handed all these to everybody, and I said, somebody needs to be talking about these people that died, and we can't even talk about it. There is so many thousands and millions of people who are affected by this COVID vaccine, and they're ignored, and they're gaslit, and nobody's helping them. It's the saddest thing. It is to genocide.
Wow. That is very sad.
Yeah.
Let
But
Go
I
ahead.
don't think I answered your question. I'm going to answer it really fast.
You're fine.
You talked about, how this meshes with the church and that. The day that Charlie Kirk died, one of my good friends put out on the group me a podcast that Kirk did with Tucker Carlson. She put it on my whole neighborhood group me, thinking everybody needs to know the truth and knows this story. obviously the ones who know our story didn't say anything, and then there's 2 nurses on there that just blew up about the whole thing, that, we should be in jail and blah, 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 and all this stuff, and we're true criminals. So, to make a long story short, how the whole church is you've seen that experiment where, there's a black and white ball on the table, and the instructor, professor pulls up one person and goes, "What do you see?" "I see black." "And what do you see on this side?" "I see white." These people saw something completely different than what we saw. We saw people live and survive and thrive. These people saw people die and 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 be sick and maimed. And you can't go to them and say, "But yeah, but I saw this, so you can see that, right?" No. What they saw. What I saw. We had a control group. They saw something, or they were fed something off the TV or wherever, all the propaganda. So from this point on, I can't really expect anybody to really say, "Oh, yeah, I get it." I'm not gonna be embraced for doing what I did, whatever. I can meet strangers from anywhere, and if they get it, they're like, "Oh, thank you. You stood up, and I get it. I get what you did." Other people are never gonna see it.
That's a very good way of putting it. I think that it helps us keep it in perspective that, just because people have their own paradigms because of what they're exposed to and what they choose to believe or choose not to believe, they will drive their actions based off of that, right? And unfortunately, I mean, having spoken to you about this before, I know that you received plenty of mistreatment, but yet, the right thing to do is to not judge them, right? Because we have to have love and compassion on them because of what they saw is what they saw, right? And that's as far as they know. Um, and that having that sort of attitude will help us get along better. It's just unfortunate that they are willfully ignorant on these things. And in the coming days, we're not going to be able to have that luxury. We're not going to have the luxury of being able to say or stay ignorant on a whole bunch of different topics, because ultimately, when it comes down to defending our freedom, it's not going to be about who's the best informed, who's the most informed. It's going to come more about down to, can you discern despite the paradigm you've been handed, do I see the black ball, do I see the white ball, right? Because for me, uh, I can't be everyone. I can't experience it what everyone else is experiencing. But the Spirit can help me look through the haze and look through the lack of experience I might have or the biases I have to understand, no, this is what this is really about here. Right. This is how I proceed forward. Hopefully I'm not speaking too esoterically here.
No, I I'm thinking the same thing. I'm thinking the same thing. I think we're all being tested right now. This was my test. Somebody else has a much harder test. I'm seeing what people are going through, and I'm like, "Thank you. I'll keep my trials over what you're going through." It just there's some hard stuff going on that people have to endure right now. And the hard thing is I don't always know how to respond to them, just because people, just the way kind of people treat or act towards me. I don't know whether I need if should I go and try to console them if I hear that they had a loved one die or something. I just don't know. I don't know where my place is with those people, because yeah, I mean it's hard because you're dealing with such hard emotions,
Very
of
charged.
yeah, death and stuff, and it's very hard. But at the same time, yeah, we're all going through stuff, and we're all being tested, and we're all being tried. And I every day it's just like, "Okay, what do you want me to do?" And, I've got a website, and I think that's just what I've been called to do. I think this is what you've been called to do, and I'm grateful for it, because I think it's a way for us to spread our stories and our testimonies and say, "Okay, here's my spiritual gifts. You're using your spiritual gifts. What do you want me to do? And I think that's what my website is supposed to be doing too. So I'm just trying to help people, gather people on my website, ourtribehealth.com, that has, you know, health and help with practitioners and products, um, so we can find our people and find our community. And those who are interested, great. And those who aren't, I mean, that's how missionary work is, right? You
Yeah.
work with the ones that are interested and you don't worry about the ones that aren't.
So, on top of that, to kind of conclude this whole interview, which has been amazing, your story is incredible and very inspiring. What message might you give to the men? I say the men specifically because I'm of the mind that the primary reason why we have struggled so much with our freedoms and why we're going to continue to struggle with our freedoms and faith is because the men are not actively, you know, being sentinels. They're not actively protecting the family, the women, the children, right? We have too much self-preservation. So what message might you share with the men to help them be prepared, to face the oncoming dangers? Because I believe that we're going to face some much more serious stuff.
Me too. Yeah. Well, and part of this, I'm speaking to myself too, but as far as everybody else goes, we need to get involved. We're just, what's the scripture? While we're, quietly led down to, the
Yeah,
devil
carefully led
captures
down to
us.
hell.
Yeah, because w- evil prevails when good men do nothing. I think we're in this state of denial that we're all fine and Zion's fine, and we're not getting involved. And even we had our caucuses last night, and there's a few people there and they're getting involved, but I think I just want to say, okay, but I walked through this experience and I'm still walking through more experiences and I'm getting close to what's actually happening. I'm not just picking it up on the news. You have to get involved. You have to see what's happening around you, and you have to have discernment from the spirit. You have to just close out. I mean, like how I felt after the refiner's fire. I didn't want to mesh back into and I think that's what God's trying to teach us is like, okay, now I've helped you feel this way and get in tune with the spirit. Now don't let Babylon and the world rub back off on you, because it's really hard to feel and hear the spirit. And I don't think we talk about that enough, of how are we really attracting the spirit to us and how are we keeping it, and how are we using that for discernment, or are we just contentious and fighting back and forth and worried, what you believe or what I believe, or who's right and who's wrong. And I mean, I've had some pretty spiritual moments that have just, I can't deny it. I mean, like last month we were out of town, and luckily I was out of town because I wasn't able to go to a meeting in person, because um, one of the persons talking that got up and spoke, I was able to help. And the spirit spoke to me so strong. And like I said, I don't have those spiritual experiences, but it was so strong to me that we were going to go to just this little church afterwards. I could not let it go for a couple of hours. I've never had that kind of experience before. And I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to be learning here? What am I supposed to still be learning from this experience? And I'm glad to be out of all the darkness and all that. And I think we still need to stay positive and have joy and have purpose. But for me, it's like we need to be better at seeking the spirit. I know I do. And I would say that to answer your question too. I
I
think
like that.
we're losing that. And for me as a nutritionist, I feel like we lose that in just if we are not taking the things into our bodies that help enhance, if we don't feel good, we're not going to feel the spirit.
I like that, and I love that you talk about intentionally seeking the spirit more, right?
Yeah.
Which is gonna require a lifestyle change. It's gonna require how we change up our routines, what we do. Are we constantly listening to, the latest news thing, right? Our favorite political pundit, or do we turn first to the words of the prophets or the scriptures? Are we seeking repentance of the things that we keep in our hearts that dampen the Spirit's reach within us? Chris, I thank you so much for participating in this interview and helping us get your story. I wanted to ask one last thing of you. Would you be okay if I conclude this episode with that video you shared of me when you found out that your case was dismissed? Would
Oh,
that would that be
absolutely.
okay? I
Yeah.
mean, in post edit, I'll add it in here so people can see it at the end. If we try to watch it now, I will bawl my eyes out, and I'm not going to do an ugly cry on this. Uh, but I would just love to be able to share that with people so they can see. Um, that it was such a moment of joy to
It
see that
was,
and
yeah.
relief.
And I was glad my sisters were there. They threw a huge party for 100 people, and they made it such a great day. 100 people came. My sister threw a big bash. They were both in town. It was one of the best days ever.
I bet. Um, so
And one more thing I'll
yeah.
add too is we had 3 news stations that came and did a press conference at Dr. Moore's house, and I had a good friend there that had actually lost one of her children to the shot,
Oh no.
and she passed the news as they were going in and they were coming out, and she said, "Why couldn't you have told the truth 2 years ago? Why are you getting the truth now?" And I mean, they still didn't tell it all, but yeah, they could have told it sooner.
Yes, they could have. There's a lot of accountability laid at their feet for sure. Um,
Yeah.
well, thanks again, Chris.
What? What? Are you serious?